I live in an old rental house, the kind with character, which is just a nice way of saying it's falling apart. It has this massive attic that runs the length of the whole roof. The only way in is through a set of pull-down stairs hidden in the hall closet. When I moved in, the landlord made a big deal about it. "Don't go up there," he said. "The whole thing's structurally unsound." Honestly, that just made me want to see what was up there even more. Curiosity, right? It gets the best of us. So one afternoon, I decided to check it out. I pulled the cord, and the old wooden ladder unfolded with a groan. But the smell that hit me wasn't what I expected. It wasn't dust or mildew. It was this thick, sweet, almost suffocating wave of burnt caramel and spoiled milk. It was a bizarre, cloying smell that completely overpowered the usual scent of old wood and decay. It was deeply unsettling. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up. The air was dead still and freezing cold, a stark contrast to the summer heat outside. The attic was a cavernous space, a graveyard of forgotten things. Discarded furniture, old trunks, and heavy ancient shadows clung to every corner. I started poking around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Tucked away under the collapsed remains of a wardrobe, I found it. It was an antique wooden pull toy, a small clown on 4 wheels. Its makeup was painted on, a little chipped, and it had this perpetually smiling, completely vacant expression. A frayed piece of twine was tied to its front. It was the definition of distorted innocence. Something about it was just off. I decided to bring it downstairs, thinking I'd clean it up. It was a cool vintage piece, right? I set it on the mantelpiece in the living room and didn't think much more of it. That night was when things started to get really strange. I woke up to a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. A soft, delicate, rhythmic tinkling sound coming from downstairs. Ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling. It was the sound of tiny metal bells. My blood ran cold. It was the clown. It sounded like it was being slowly, steadily dragged across the polished hardwood floor. I lay there, completely rigid in bed, listening. The clown was on the mantelpiece. I hadn't moved it. Nobody had been in the house. The tinkling just kept going, slow and methodical, and then it stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. And then I heard it. A high-pitched, fragile giggle like a small child coming from the empty dining room. That was it. I bolted out of bed, grabbed the heavy baseball bat I keep by the door, and did a full sweep of the house. Every door was locked, every window was secure. I was alone. When I checked the living room, the clown was back on the mantelpiece, perfectly centered, its painted smile mocking me. The next day I knew I couldn't live like this. No way was I sharing my house with something that plays with toys in the middle of the night. My plan was simple: get some tools and seal the attic staircase shut, permanently. I pulled the ladder down again, that sickeningly sweet smell washing over me, and climbed up, determined. When I reached the top step and my head cleared the attic floor, I saw why the landlord was so insistent. There, right above my bedroom, was a section of the attic floor where the old planks had been carefully removed, leaving a perfect square hole about 3 feet wide. The void was pitch black. I knelt down, my heart pounding in my chest. I pointed my flashlight into the hole, its beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the plaster ceiling of my bedroom below. As I moved the light around, I noticed the edges of the opening were strangely smooth, worn down. It looked like something large and soft had been resting its weight there for a very, very long time. Suddenly, a sound erupted from the dark hole. It wasn't a giggle this time. It was a sustained, wet, horrifying shriek, impossibly loud, like a microphone pushed right up against a terrified throat. It was a sound of pure agony. In my shock, I dropped the flashlight. It rolled away, leaving me in near darkness. That sweet, sugary smell was now so strong, it made me gag. I scrambled to back away, but my foot snagged on something. I looked down. Lying right next to my shoe was that frayed piece of twine from the clown toy. But it wasn't just twine, it was wet, covered in dark reddish-brown droplets that were still glistening. And the end of it wasn't frayed anymore. It had been neatly tied into a perfect, tiny noose. A freezing cold draft rushed up from the hole, and then I heard it again, a dragging sound, not the toy this time. Not. This was something heavy, something being pulled across the rough, unfinished floorboards of the attic, moving directly toward the opening. I fumbled in the dark, my hand finally closing around the flashlight. I switched it on, but I knew it was too late. I could hear the wood around the hole groaning under an immense pressure. I pointed the light at the opening, and that's when I saw it. The dark polished surface of a single round wooden eye, peering up from the edge of the void, staring straight at me. Thanks for sticking with me through that. I'm not sure what happens next. If you liked this story, or if you just want to make sure I'm still here, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. They offered me a temporary gig as a solo caretaker for an inactive marine research station off the coast of Maine. Sounded like a dream job for someone like me, who enjoys their own company. The reality was total isolation. 5 miles out on a concrete platform, just me and the endless ocean. A supply boat came once a week, weather permitting. My only link to the world was an old crackling VHF radio. The station's main job, even in its inactive state, was hydrophone monitoring. Basically, listening to the deep ocean. The heart of the operation was in the main listening chamber, buried deep in the station's concrete core, down a narrow, damp steel staircase that always seemed to drip, no matter the weather. The first week was pure bliss, just the rhythmic crash of waves against the platform legs, a steady hypnotic pulse. It was peaceful. But then, the hydrophone started picking up things. They weren't wails, and they weren't seismic shifts. The waveforms were all wrong. They were voices. Of course, I recorded them. At normal speed, they were just noise, deeply distorted, like low guttural whispers spoken through a thick curtain of mud and static. But you could tell, even through the distortion, that it was language. The sound waves themselves were completely alien. It was as if they were slowed down by a factor of 10, stretching every single syllable into a monstrous, drawn-out groan. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. The station had some old processing software, basic stuff, but it could manipulate audio. I decided to speed up the recordings, hoping to restore whatever the natural frequency was. I loaded the first sample, clicked the 10x speed up, and hit play. The whispers resolved into human English, a woman's voice but heavily synthesized, robotic, like an old text-to-speech program. And it was repeating the same 3 words over and over. It is watching. A cold dread started to bloom in my gut. I loaded up another recording. This one was different. A second voice, rough and gasping for air. It sounded familiar. My blood ran cold when I realized who it sounded like. It was my father, who died years ago. And his voice was saying, "Don't turn around." I shut it down. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was completely alone, miles from another living soul, surrounded by an endless, indifferent ocean, and I was listening to ghosts trapped in the water. After that, the paranoia set in. A deep, gnawing fear that I couldn't shake. Every time I looked out at the rolling gray expanse, I felt this chilling conviction that I was being studied from below, a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I started getting vertigo just standing by the railing, this dizzying feeling that the entire ocean was an eye, and I was a speck under its unblinking gaze. The real fear culminated 3 nights ago. I couldn't sleep. The silence between the wave crashes was louder than the noise. I forced myself to go back down into the hydrophone chamber. The air was heavy, thick with the taste of salt and ozone. I put on my headphones and played a new recording, one that had come in just an hour before. It was a long one, 10 minutes of agonizingly slow, wet sounds. My hand was shaking as I moved the mouse and hit the 10x speed playback button. The woman's voice was back, but this time it wasn't a calm repetition. She was frantic, screaming, not speaking. "It's right there, right there." Then something new, a third voice. It was impossibly clear, cutting through the static like a scalpel. It was high, smooth, and utterly devoid of any human emotion. And it didn't sound like it was coming from the headphones or the speakers. It sounded like it was being spoken right next to my left ear. "He is moving too quickly." I froze. My heart didn't just pound, it felt like it liquefied in my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was completely, utterly helpless. And then the floor of the chamber vibrated, a violent, sickening jolt that shot up my spine. It wasn't a wave hitting the station. This was a sharp, single impact from directly beneath me. That broke the spell. I scrambled up the steel stairs, my hands slipping on the damp metal, and locked myself in the main control room. I grabbed the emergency satellite phone, my only real lifeline. I tried to call the mainland, but the signal was dead. The receiver was filled with a thick, buzzing static, the same kind of static from the hydrophone recordings. I'm trapped here. The ocean sounds different now. The waves aren't just crashing on the legs below, I can hear them lapping at the windows of the control room. These windows are 20 feet above the normal high tide line. The water is too high. I found the satellite phone this morning. It had been tossed carelessly under the main console. I didn't put it there. The phone wasn't broken, but the plastic casing was cracked wide open. And wedged tightly inside, right where the microphone component used to be, was a tiny, folded piece of waterlogged paper. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it. The paper was covered in my father's handwriting, frantic, desperate, and nearly illegible. He was repeating one phrase over and over, cramming the words into every available space. "The water is inside the box." I'm looking up at the windows now. The grey sea is pressing against the glass. It's not just high, it's here. FogTales are true, if you believe them. Sweet dreams. When we first rented this 1940s colonial, the landlord laid down one very specific rule. The small back room on the second floor, the one marked nursery on the blueprints, had to stay locked, untouched. He gave us a story about it being filled with old, water-damaged junk from a previous tenant, something about complicated insurance. It sounded reasonable enough. So for 3 months, my wife and I played by the rules. The door stayed shut. Then the heat wave hit. A real scorcher. Our only window AC unit was in the guest room, right next to the nursery. The problem? The power cord was just a bit too short to reach the outlet. The only way to make it work was to run an extension cord through that forbidden room. I figured, what's the harm? It's just for a few hours. The lock was old, a simple pin tumbler. A bit of wiggling with a paperclip, and it clicked open in under 10 seconds. The moment the door swung inward, I was hit by a wall of sensation. It wasn't the smell of mold or mildew I'd expected. It was the cloying scent of decades-old baby powder, thick and sweet, mixed with the sharp tang of stale varnish. And underneath it all, a sound, a low, constant, electrical buzzing. My eyes scanned the room, trying to pinpoint the source. There, on a corner shelf, sat an antique baby monitor. One of those huge cream-colored bakelite units, the kind with a single glowing green eye on the front. It was unplugged, its cord dangling uselessly and covered in a thick blanket of dust. That had to be it. I grabbed it, pulled it down, and without a second thought, stuffed it into a trash bag and tied it shut. But the buzzing didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the shelf anymore. The sound seemed to be coming from the center of the room. I followed it, my ears straining, until I was standing in front of a small wooden rocking horse. It was perched on a peeling patch of wallpaper, its painted eyes staring into nothing. The humming was emanating from inside the toy itself. I picked it up and gave it a shake. Nothing rattled. The sound was deep within, a part of its very core. A cold knot started to form in my stomach. I put the horse down, backed out of the room, and locked the door behind me. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I was jolted awake by a sound coming from the wall that our master bedroom shared with the nursery. It was the soft, high-pitched giggle of a little girl, but it was wrong. Distorted, warped, like a voice trying to push its way through a thick piece of chewing gum. It was playful, yet utterly chilling. The giggling grew louder, echoing right through the plaster. I swung my legs out of bed and pressed my ear against the cold wall. The laughter escalated, twisting from playful to desperate, then into a choked, terrifying shriek that suddenly cut off with a sharp crackle of static. The silence that followed was so absolute, so profound, it made my ears ache. Fear is a strange motivator. It tells you to run, to hide, but it also plants a seed of morbid curiosity. I had to know what was happening. I crept back to the nursery, my heart hammering against my ribs. The key turned, the lock clicked. The trash bag with the old monitor was right where I'd left it, near the door. But it was empty. My eyes darted around the room, landing on the floor in the very center. There it was, the baby monitor. It was no longer covered in dust. Its front had been wiped clean. And in the darkness of the room, the green eye was glowing with a faint, sickly light. The static returned, thick and violent, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. And then, through the noise, a voice. Tiny, crystal clear. It was the little girl. But she wasn't laughing anymore. She was counting backwards. 7, 6, 5. I needed to see something normal, something real. I stumbled to the window, gasping for air, and looked out. The moon was full, its light reflecting brightly off the large pane of glass. I saw my own reflection staring back at me. But it wasn't me. Not really. The face in the glass was stretched, pale. The eyes were too large, the head tilted at an angle that was just unnatural. It was the perfect, terrifying, uncanny valley of my own face. Then the monitor crackled one last time. The little girl's voice spoke again, but this time it was calm and felt impossibly close, as if she were whispering right in my ear. She doesn't like it when you look at her like that. A surge of pure adrenaline hit me. I lunged at the monitor, ripping it off its base, tearing the ancient wires out. The sound died. The static vanished. I scrambled out of the room, slammed the door shut, and fumbled with the lock. I haven't been back in since. I can't. This morning, my phone rang. It was the landlord. "Hey," he said, his voice casual. "Sorry about the inconvenience with that back room. Just remembered the key to the nursery has a recording chip built into the handle. It's an old security habit from a previous tenant." My blood ran cold. I glanced at my bedside table. There was the key. I swear I left it in the nursery door. My hand trembled as I reached for it. It slipped through my fingers, hit the hardwood floor, and shattered. And there, nestled inside the broken plastic, was a tiny microchip. With shaking hands, I used my phone to read the data. It was a single audio file. Not a girl's laughter, not counting. It was a calm, adult voice, a man's voice, speaking on an endless loop. "Do not leave the room. The silence is not for you. Do not leave the room."